Hi, in this video we're going to talk about a guide to Python programming. So this is our chapter 1, the first part. So first of all, let's look at this cartoon. It's basically a pretty funny cartoon about Python. So this little guy on the ground says, "Are you flying now?" The guy on the top, which will be you guys, will say Python, right? And here are some dialogues, right? And you can simply just type "Hello World," and you don't have to type the white space. So let's get started. The objective of today's class is going to introduce the Python, about the history, what is a Python, and how do we get started with Python. So we're going to install the actually Python to your computer. So in this class we actually expect everyone be able to type the code and you can see it right away. So this is a very practical class. We really expect you to actually play with the code and you have a good feeling about the code. And then we are going to demonstrate the Python development environment, just in case if you have some real like a real big project, you probably need that development environment. But for learning, we're going to use notebooks, and I will show you how to install that as well. So the first thing is about Hello World. As a computer program, normally the very first statement you're going to learn is how to print out a hello world. This is actually a tradition, right? So we have several ways. You can do the console window, you can do terminal. We're going to do in the notebooks. We're going to do it in the notebooks, and the powerful yet easy to install the programming language. It's actually platform independent. So the Python is actually one of the probably most common programming language. If you see the ratings of all the programming language, Python actually becomes one of the like top 1 or top 2 programming language that most programmers are using, and lots of employers, they actually expect to hire some people who know Python. This language was first developed by Guido, I don't know how to pronounce it correctly, Guido van Rossum in 1991. And the name actually is not firstly after the snake. It's actually named after a comedy troupe, Monty Python. So it was named after a comedy, and however, later, since the Python is kind of like a snake, so people actually use the snake image to referring the language itself. So it's kind of interesting transfer, and it's getting more and more popular. The first time I was using it, it was in 2004, and it was not that popular at that time. We just feel like it's very close to a like human language, so it's a very high level program language. Lots of times even a regular person, they don't know how to programming at all, they can start to read the code, somehow understand what is basically doing. So that's called high level programming, instead of some other languages like C or assembly language. You have to have some special training to be able to understand the code. So it's since it's a high-level programming language, it's also called the interpreted language. So it's you don't need to even compile it. Other languages like C, C++, C Sharp, Java, most of them are like you have to edit the programming, and then you have to compile the programming, then you can execute the programming. Well, since this is a interpreted programming language, you can just edit the program language and then can execute it right away. You don't need to compile it. Um, so it's also object oriented language. And then some people may ask, this is the programming. What do you mean programming? It's actually about we when we say programs, it's not like soccer programs or baseball or football programs. It's actually algorithms and computer programs. An algorithm is actually a set of instructions or set of commands to accomplish something. For example, you want to make s'mores or you want to boil eggs. What are the instructions? Suppose you are talking to a dummy. Suppose you are talking to a robot. How are you going to tell the robot to actually successfully boil eggs or fry eggs, right? So there are certain sequence, there are certain operations has to be done, and those operations has a certain order. So the programming language is basically the same thing. Algorithm is the same thing. So when you are writing a computer programs, you are generally tell the computer, which is a super dumb, right? So computers, many people think computers are smart. They are super smart. They have strong memory, everything, right? They compute fast. No, they are wrong. Computers are dumb. They are just a machine. Who are smarter? Who are smart? We are smart, right? You guys are smart. Because you guys are the programmers. You guys are the future developers. You make a dumb machine a smart machine, right? So that's the purpose of us to learning those things. So a computer program basically is a sequence of instructions that will be executed or will be operated by the computer, including several devices. Like one of the important devices which counted as a brain of a computer, it's called the CPU. CPU stands for computing units, right? It's kind of like the basic operation is actually addition. So they do all those calculation. So most of the programs are just calculated zeros and ones. And then you have memory, you have hard drive, you have display, you have input and output devices. All of those are actually work together to make the program work. Computer programs can be written in all kinds of languages, like Python, Perl, C, C++. They're just different languages. Just like what we're talking, like we're speaking English right now. But there are tons of languages other than English, right? Like there are Russian, Chinese, Japanese, Spain. All of those are just one languages. Normally, I told people that if you can speak English well, then you can write a program well. Okay. So some people may ask, what's higher level? What's high level programming language? A high level programming language actually separated from the low level programming languages. It's closer to human languages than the machine languages. Machines only understand zeros and ones. So that's why assembly language is basically a bunch of zero and ones. so which is harder to program. But early programs are all in like assembly language. It's a bunch of command and then data. Nowadays, the computers are based on a basic philosophy that we have a sequence operations and then another set of data. So they work together to get job done. So the higher level programming language is actually the ones that close to your daily language, like when you are teaching someone over the phone to how to fry an egg, for example. Then you're gonna tell them like step 1, step 2, step 3. That's exactly what we're gonna do in the high level programming language. It is pretty user friendly. It is pretty user friendly. And Python is one of those higher level language, and is also considered as a glue language. Then what is a glue? They basically means they are going to combine or integrate it with other language like C, C++, and Java, and some other command or other language like Perl. Those can be actually coexisting in the code, and it will be executed correctly. So it's actually leverage the strengths of other languages, such as the speed of C or C++ languages. C and C++, they are low-level language, so which is famous for the speed. Like the operating system normally is developed by C, language C, and lots of system programs are written by C++. But they're harder. They are a lot harder. It needs quite a exercise to be master of it. The Python is actually an interpreted language. So what does that mean? That means they are just saved as a text file, and you don't need to compile it. And it's actually a list of instructions that the computer understand, the Python language environment understand. So it's like an interpreter. Interpreted language are read and then executed directly. They don't need to compile. There are many others like Python, Perl, Ruby. Java is strictly they need to compile. Java strictly normally they need a certain compile. However, JavaScript is a interpreted language. You don't need to compile JavaScript to be executed. Then what is compile? Compile basically is just to transform those instructions and data in a correct order so computer can actually execute correctly. That's called compile. It's like a reshuffle the instructions and data. So here's the comparison of Hello World in Python and C, language C. Python itself, lots of the syntax or grammar is very similar like language C. Here's a comparison. Okay, you can actually see the language. Later we're going to show this. We're going to show this comparison between Hello World in Python and C. You're going to see that in a second. So the next question is, how do we set up Python? So since we said that Python is actually cross-platform, that means you can run Python almost on any machine, on Windows, Linux, Mac. So here's you can actually find the instruction how to install Python from some places, especially the official language on Python, and then you can have the. Here is the example. This is the link: http://www.python.org, That's the official website, and then you can find instructions. And in the lab part, we're actually install the Python and set up the notebook step by step. If it's not installed, you're gonna go to this link to download one. Again, we're gonna show that in step by step how to do that. And we also will install Anaconda distribution. Why we need to do this? Because number one, it's easy to use. It's briefly run Jupyter Notebook. Explore, no install offline options. It's best for beginners to learn Python. And how do we do it? Again, we're going to show you that in the lab part. And you can actually Google Anaconda download, and then you can download and install. It's super easy, but it takes quite a few minutes to develop, to actually install. It depends on your computer speed, computer configurations. And for development, like if you have a bigger project, you want to actually develop a bigger project, then you probably need the IDE, integrated development environment. Then we suggest you use the Python. One of the Python software is called the PyCharm. There are many, like I heard there are Spider and others. There are tons of them. You just choose the one that you like. Personally, I like PyCharm, and it's many people are using it as well. And so introduction of IDLE. So it's actually integrated development environment. It's called IDE, integrated development environment, IDE. There are many of them. Like we just mentioned, it's just a really personal choice. Then what is the interactive and script mode? Interactive mode is you tell the Python what to do and it will do immediately. While script mode is you write, edit, node, and save the Python programs, just like you write a document in Word processor, and then other types of text processors, and then you basically click a button says execute or run. It will actually run your script from the first line to the very last line. So instead of interactive mode, it's like most of the time it's like a 9 by 9 or a few lines. You write a few lines and then it executes the results, and then you write a few lines and then it's execute another few lines. So this is more like you talk to the environment, talk to the program, hey, do this step, and then show me the results, right? And the script mode is like, okay, I already had the prototype, I already know how to do it. I want to type all of them in one document and then execute and get the whole job done. So this is like a whole thing. This is like a break it down into many steps. And then the other part is programming in interactive mode. As we just mentioned, it's great for immediate feedback. If you're exploring something, if you are uncertain, you can use this interactive mode. Here are some jargons or terms. The jargons here we're talking about, number one is called a statement. What is a statement? It's actually single units in programming language that performs some actions. For example, print some messages, right? This is called a statement. Or you tell the programs like I equals I plus 1, for example. In that case, the whole thing is a statement. And a print is actually it's a command. It's also a statement. This is the whole thing is a statement. What is a string? String is another jargon. It says the sequence of characters normally is has a quote, just like when we are talking about something, we quote and unquote. An expression, something that it has a value, something that has a value, or it can be calculated um, to a single value, like 2 plus 7. The whole thing is actually can be replaced by 9, or can be calculated or evaluated. That's called an expression. And then some other things like game over, it's actually a string. It's also counted as expression. Then you may ask, what is the difference between expression and statement? The expression is actually we are focused on the value of the whole thing. Well, statement normally combine both the command and the expression. So a lot of time you can think expression is kind of like data. Well, the statement is like it's actually command and data together. Okay. The next one is called code. What is code? Code is actually the sequence of command and data. So you have a few lines of code and data. The whole thing is supposed to finish something. That's called a code. So it's a assembly or a combination of all of those. Next one is called the syntax highlighting. Syntax highlighting is display the programming code in different colors or fonts. For example, when we have the command, it's going to show us some different colors. So you will tell, okay, that's colored. That's some reserved keywords I'm not supposed to touch, or I'm not supposed to use freely. We have to follow some tradition. So those are called syntax highlighting. And arrows, there are different arrows. So one of the arrows is called syntax arrows. So this type of arrows is actually you violate a certain rules of the language. For example, English, right? When we see English, we have to have the normally in the ordinary cases, we have to have the subjective, then verb, then objective, which is counted as a complete sentence. If we missed the verb, for example, if I missed the verb, a lot of times it's gonna give me errors. I don't know what you're talking, right? So in that case, it will be counted as a syntax error. And then computer actually has another type of error. It's called the bug or executing error. So those errors will be basically acting something that is not what you expected. That is called a bug. That's called a bug, or it's wrong, right? It's not doing the thing that you expected to do. That's called a bug. And programming in script mode, again, it's you will need a IDE, and then you can write, edit, save, and load the program, and then execute it. So it's will execute from line 1 to the end. So the game over program, so we can actually show you we can write a small game over program, and then we can actually have some comment. We can have some blank lines. Comment basically means it's some loads for the program to read, not read by the computer. So only the humans or the programmers, the developers to read, just remind them what's going on or what's the status. Well, the blank lines also will be generally will be ignored by the computers. Lots of just some spaces to separate the logics of the programs, right? The logics of the code. So so like this is the 3 lines of the code is doing one small task, a subtask. Then I make a blank line, and then write another subtask, and then make another blank line. So that will make our human to read the code easier. And the console windows is another example. It's basically it's a final line keeps the console window open. So if we're using notebooks, we're not going to see those. And the last thing we want to mention is actually Python is an objective oriented programming language. What is object-oriented programming? This is actually a very widely used methodology that we treated everything as an object, and then we are programming accordingly. So for example, in a game, a sprite or a little figure is treated as an object, or a weapon, either a gun or dagger or a flower. Everything will be treated as an object. So when we program, we just be focused on that particular object. We just study, okay, for example, a human, a sprite. It's gonna have the appearance. It has the action, what action they're supposed to do. For example, if the sprite is a human, then it probably can do almost everything, right? It can speak, it can run, can fight, can jump. Well, if it's the sprite is an animal, for example, it's a monster. Maybe the monster cannot speak at all. It's just makes a sound or noises, right? So those will be a lot easier for us to actually get the job done. So again, it's just one methodology. It's not the only one. There's another type. It's called a procedure programming. So you basically it's just like a sequence of orders. You like how to fry an egg. That's a lot of times is in procedure. I need to say that program language C is actually and it's actually procedure language. There are many others like Fortran, any others. Many of them early stage of the programming languages are mostly in procedure. Nowadays, most are in object-oriented program language. Okay, so this serves as the summary. In this summary, we basically introduced what's the Python. Python is a high-level object-oriented program language that is very powerful and easy to use. And the Python it's a glue language. It can work with other languages. So we can, for Python development, you can have IDE or you can have interactive mode. And the last one, we introduced some jargons like a string, what is statement, and a print, and what's syntax, and what's expressions. All of those are actually will be repeatedly used in the next almost all the lectures. So that's all for pretty much for today. And we also has the syntax errors, a bug, and how do you use the comment, things like that, the comment, and that's all for today's lecture part. And later we're going to show you the lab part.